This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We're learning Sefer Ezra, Parak Zayin, Pasuk Ches. Vayavo Yerushalayim b'chodesh hachamishi. Ezra comes to Yerushalayim in the 5th month. Nisan Iyar Sivan Tammuz Av. Yishnas Hashviyas HaMelech. The 7th year of the king, of King Daryavesh. Ki b'yechad l'chodesh harishayin hu yusad hamala mibavel. Because on the first day of the 1st month was the beginning of his ascent from Babel. U'b'yachad l'chodesh hachamishi and Rosh Chodesh Av ba'al Yerushalayim. He comes to Jerusalem kiyad elikav, as the providence of God hatoiva alav, which was good to him. And we pointed out last week, so it's a good thing we're reminding ourselves, that the beginning of the parak traces Ezra back until who? Aaron HaKohen. Yeah. Aaron HaKohen. So we're why are we saying that? So simply, we're speaking about the pure lineage and yichus of Ezra, that this man is backed by tremendous chusim, but perhaps also it's giving us a little bit of a insight into the hashgacha pratis that's happening over here, and that is the day that he arrives back in Yerushalayim is the first day of Av, which happens to be the yahrzeit of Aaron HaKohen. Okay.
More important is he came from Pinchas, no?
That's also important, yeah. What?
The lineage of the Kohen.
Yes. Ki Ezra heichin levavai. Ezra prepared his heart, lidrosh his Torah Hashem, to seek out the Torah of God, velasos, and to perform it. Ulalamed be Yisrael, and to teach the Jewish people chayk umishpat, statutes and judgment. Let me just speak out again the way we ended off last week, and that is the Malbim on Pasuk Vav points out that Ezra, of course, was one of the founders of the Anshe Knesset Agdola, and Shimon HaTzadik was one of the last members of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. And Shimon HaTzadik, right, the Mishnah says in Avos, Hayu Mishiori Knesset Agdola Hu Haya Omer Al Shlosh Dvarim Ha'olam Oimed Al HaTorah Al HaAvoda VeHaGemilas Chasadim. Why is Shimon HaTzadik stressing this? Because the Malbim says the Anshe Knesset Agdola strengthened these 3 areas of Avodas Hashem. Zerubbabel and Yehoshua the Kohen Gadol, they built the Beis HaMikdash. They fortified the pillar of Avodas Hashem. Then Ezra comes in, he fortifies the pillar of Torah, and as we're going to learn, again, let's get clear, Ezra has nothing to do with the Binyan Beis HaMikdash. Ezra has one primary job: strengthen learning Torah, strengthening Torah observance. And then Nehemiah later on strengthens the wall of the city, strengthens the societal aspects of Avodas Hashem. And quite interestingly, even though all these individuals are characters in Sefer Ezra, the one who the Sefer is named after is Ezra, of course, because his job is the most important, and that is to be Malamed Torah L'Amo Yisrael. Okay, so let us continue.
He did do his service in the Beis HaMikdash, right?
No, I mean, we're going to see he did participate somewhat, but the Beis HaMikdash was really up a lot by the time he got there.
So isn't he put into the rotation?
Yes, certainly he's from the rotation, but his main function was to be Machazek the Torah, the Amara Torah. Okay, now a letter is being sent from Daryavesh, and who's called Artach Shasta, and he gives a letter in support of the Binyan HaMikdash and the efforts of the Jews. V'zeh Parshegen HaNishtavan. This is the text of the letter. Asher Nasan HaMelech Artach Shasta. The king Artach Shasta gave LeEzra HaKohen, to Ezra the Kohen, HaSoifer, the scribe. Now we said Soifer, scribe, doesn't necessarily mean scribe, but the one who counted the words, the letters, how many psukim there are in the different svarim, how many times Haman appears in the Megillah, how many times Esther appears in the Megillah, how many times Zeresh, Memuchan, okay. Alright? Soifer divrei mitzvos Hashem v'chukav, the counter of the words of the mitzvos Hashem and the statutes, Al Yisrael, on behalf of the Jewish people. Now, what does it mean, Al Yisrael? So Rashi learns Al Yisrael, going back on the mitzvos. The mitzvos were given Al Yisrael. However, the Malbim learns Al Yisrael means the king's letter was written al Yisrael concerning the Jewish people. Now you have to know, who's this letter coming from? Darius the Persian. Gotta love the Persians, right? Darius the Persian was a Jew. His mother was Esther. His father was Achashverosh. Okay? Now, what do you mean? Isn't there an opinion that Esther lived with a shade? That Esther would create a demon for Achashverosh to live with? Even according to that opinion, but not the night that she went to, that Mordechai instructed her to go, she definitely mothered Daryavesh. Okay, next pasuk. Artaxshasta Melech Malchaya. Artaxshasta, the king of kings. Li Ezra Chahana, to Ezra the scribe, Safar Dasa Dielaka, the scribe of the law of God, who's Shemaya Gemir, of heaven. Now what does Gemir mean? Gemir is very unclear what the word Gemir means. Does Gemir mean, take a look in the Mitsudais. The Mitsudais says, Gemir, Kula, means completely. Dielaka Shemaya Gemir. She was the God of heaven completely. The God of heaven completely. Uche'enes, and he sent this letter to Che'enes. What does that mean he sent it to Eder? In other words, the letter was not only just to Ezra, but to the entire emperor, especially the residents of Che'enes, which was the major area of Ever Hanar. Now, the Malbim learns that the word Gemir the Malbim learns means etc. V'goymer. In other words, to the whole long laundry list of various kingdoms. And he issues forth the following proclamation. Mini sim te'em. From me issues forth a decree. V'chomis nadav, anyone who is generous, b'malchusi, in my kingdom, min Amma Yisrael, from the Jewish nation, v'chahanohi, from the Kohanim, v'levaye, and the Levium, limahach v'Yushalayim, to go to Jerusalem. In other words, anyone who, in my kingdom, among the Yisraelim, the Kohanim, Levium, who volunteers to go to Yerushalayim, imach yahach, should accompany you. Now, this does not refer to the Goyim. It means min Amma Yisrael. Right? In other words, my proclamation is that anyone whose heart inspires him to go up to Yerushalayim should go. Pasuk Yadalid. Kal kavel, because ki kal kavel di min kada malka, because from before the king, v'shivas ya'atayi, and the 7 advisors, right, like Achashverosh had shivas hasarisim, hamish arisim, espinei hamel, right? So this was a very well-known concept, the 7 advisors. So I issue forth from before me and my 7 advisors, shliach, I'm sending you, in other words, I'm dispatching you, levakara, to investigate al Yehud, of the Jews, not the hood, al Yehud, right, on the Jews, v'Yushalayim, and Yushalayim, v'das alakach dividach, about the law of God. In other words, Daryavesh is promoting this type of dictatorship, religious dictatorship that Ezra is going to impose, where he's going to be investigating exactly what's the matzav of Jewish observance, who the Jews are marrying, what time they get to davening, making sure they don't pull out their cell phones in the middle of davening to check their messages, make sure they turn their phones off before davening, before the shiur, not to interrupt the learning, chas v'shalom, to answer a phone or to check a message in the middle of a shiur, or to make sure you don't check your messages in the middle of davening. That's what Ezra, that's what his job was, right? To religious dictatorship. And this was promoted by Daryavesh. Okay? Now Daryavesh, he knew what Judaism was. His mother, Esther, I don't know exactly to what level Esther was able to be Mekayim the mitzvahs in the palace, but nevertheless, he certainly knew his mother was a Jew, and Exactly, he must have had some type of affinity for it.
We know the Jewish ascendant at that point in time. Rabin Me'aretz Messiah Hadim.
Messiah Hadim.
So why would we think that it became more benevolent towards the Jews and there would be more acceptance, that the Jews would be more open about their observance?
You mean what did Esther do exactly?
She didn't have to do anything. I mean, right now I think her uncle or her cousin is the prime minister. I mean, why don't we think that things...
Now, well, in the palace, what Esther conducted a Shabbos meal, was Achashverosh there? Achashverosh is a guy.
Do we know if he was an Orel or not? It would be hard for me to believe she would have...
I don't think he was a Shomer Torah. I don't think he was an observant Jew. I don't think Darius was an observant. We don't find anywhere that Darius was a Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Right? So look what it says. Okay. Pasuk Tesvav. Ulehevala, and to transport. Kisafu dahav, silver and gold. Dimalka, that the king, v'ya'atoyi, and the advisors, his nadavu, donate, lelaka Yisrael, to the God of Israel. Di birusham, that was in Yerushalayim. Mishkanei, where God dwells. In other words, I want you to transport the silver and gold that the king and his advisors have contributed toward the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So it's very interesting. So who's donating this money? Darius, all of the Persian advisors. Now look at the Malbim. So in other words, Darius is allowing that the people who transport his donations, he's allowing a lot of people to travel with them, because you could just imagine you're going on, the ancient roads with so much wealth and so much money. You need guardians, you need shomrim. So Darius is allowing the accompaniment of the shomrim. V'chol kesaf, and all the silver, udahav, and gold. Tiseh hashkach, that is found. B'chol medinois Bavel, and all the communities of Bavel. Now, what does it mean that's found? What do you mean found? On the way, they're just gold and silver lying around. So the Malbim says, let's see the Metzudas first. The Metzudas says, all the donations of the Goyim are also donating to the cause. Together with the donations of the Jews and the Kohanim, should all be brought up to Yerushalayim. Kol kavel dina, so that asparna. Rashi learns asparna means expeditiously. Look at Rashi. Kol kavel dina uvishvil kach. Because of this, shall avodas hamikdash, so that the service of the temple mehera sikna will be bought quickly. Bekesef, what are they going to buy? B'chas b'dana, they're going to buy with this money toirin, oxen, dichrin, rams, imrin, sheep, umin chashain, meal offerings, v'niskehain, libations, usakarev himai, and will be brought there. And you'll offer them. Almad v'cha, in the temple, di beis alakachaim, that is in the house of your God, di birushlam, that is in Yerushalayim. Umadi alach, and whatever you would like to do. In other words, umadi alach v'alechach yetav. Whatever is good in your eyes and the eyes of your brothers, whatever pleases you. B'shar kasva v'dava, with the rest of the silver and gold, lameva, to do, kiros ela kachoim ta'avdon. According to the will of your God, you should do. In other words, says Darius, I am giving you a lot of money. I'm making personal donations. The Goyim are donating. The Kohanim are donating. The Levim are donating. Use it for the animals, for the libations, for the meal offerings. And whatever is left is at your discretion. You want to buy extra cameras for Torah Anytime so that you could, film the Avodah? No problem. You want to buy brand new Sfarim? No problem. You want whatever you want to buy with the extra money, that is up to you. By the way, the Malbim writes that this is not necessarily halachically correct, because there's a halacha that when money is donated to Kachim, the leftover money cannot be used for bedek habayis or for discretionary causes. In fact, what would you do with leftover money donated for kachim? You would bring what's called ketz hamizbeach. Ketz means like figs. In the olden days, they didn't have, sweets like they have today. They used to eat figs for dessert, right? Nowadays, we don't eat figs for anything. But in the olden days, they would eat figs for dessert. So ketz hamizbeach. So with the leftover money they would use for the Beis Hamikdash in terms of the karbanos, the karbanos oila that were brought on the mizbeach, so that the mizbeach would not be have a lull in the action. Okay. Umanaya, but the kalim, these are referring to the original kalim of the mikdash, the misyahavin lach, that were given to you, that God gave you, l'falchan beis halakach, for the service of the house of God. Hashleim, bring back, return. Kadam alakah Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem. So in other words, Daryavish is saying, all these kalim that I have in my treasury here, you bring them all back. Usha'ar chashchos, and the other needs, beis halakach, of the house of God, diyipelach lamintan, that it falls upon you to give. Tintain, you should give. Min beis ginzei malka, from my treasuries. In other words, Daryavish is saying, whatever else you need, I'm giving you access to my treasuries. You could take the money and use it for whatever you want. So Rabbi, I had a thought this morning that the end of Megillas Esther ends, by the way, the Goin says, Mas is the gematria 100. EA, VEA,
21.
27. 27. 127. Vav Aleph Yud Yud. 127 Dias. Al Haaretz. Mas is 100. That's Ba'aretz. EA is the islands, 27. In other words, Achashverosh was able to tax all 127 Medinas. Why does Megillah end off with this statement? What does it have to do with the Purim story?
Funded the building of the Beis Hamikdash.
So the Brisker Rav says that, you see from here how the story comes full circle. Because we would expect, if Achashverosh tells, Jews, we were about to kill you, now you could kill your enemies, you would think this would greatly weaken the power of Achashverosh. His malchus may start to falter. No, you see that Achashverosh made the rule, and now his malchus became stronger. He was even able to tax the people. But we could say, based on what we're learning today, what Rabbi Yosef is saying, that the story really comes full circle. Why? The beginning of the Megillah starts, Achashverosh is celebrating the Beis Hamikdash not being built, and little does he know, the end of the Megillah, he's taxing the people. To do what? To fill his treasuries. Guess what that money is going to be used for in a few prakim later in Sefer Ezra? It's going to finance the Beis Hamikdash. So here, the Hashgacha of Hashem is, in the beginning he's celebrating the Churban, the end he's really funding financing the Churban, the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Yeah, good. You buy that? Okay. I'll charge you later. Fine. So it says, Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Umini ano ar Tarshasta, and I, from before me, King Tarshasta, Malka, the king, Simteim, I issue a decree. L'chol gizav raya, to all the treasurers. Di bavar nara, there on the Transjordan. Di chodi yisha alenchain, whatever is asked of you. Ezra Chana, whatever Ezra the Kohen asks. Safar dasa di lakashmaya, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven. As parna yisave, they should carry it out expeditiously. What should they give? Ad kesaf kakrin mea. If Ezra asked for silver, up to 100 kikar of silver. Interesting. That's the amount of silver that Haman was going to spend, that he gave Achashverosh to kill the Jews. Pasuk Chaf Beis. Viad chintin, karin ma'at. They need wheat, 100 kor of wheat. Viad chamar, if they need wine, batin ma'ah, 100 baths. Viad batin meshachma, 100 baths of oil. Umalach, and salt, dilachasav. I don't have to write. Unlimited supply of salt, with iodine and without iodine, whatever kind of salt you want. Why unlimited salt? Because the king presumably had an unlimited supply of salt. Okay? Now we get up to the interesting part that you're really going to love. Ulachaim. Rashi reads the word ulachaim means v'lachem, to you. To you. And to you, Mahoidin, we are letting know, the Chahanaya, all the Kaihanim, Levai and Levim, Zamaraya, the musicians, Saraya, the gatekeepers, Nesinaya, the Nesinim, Ufalche Beis Kadina, and all the workers of the house of God, Minda, Veloi, Vahalach, you ready for this? The levies, the taxes, and the tithes, La shalet lamirmei aleihim. We cannot charge them. Whoa.
Exemption.
Whoa. Says Daryavish the king, who's exempt from paying taxes? Anyone involved in the function of the Beis HaMikdash, anyone involved in Klei Kodesh are exempt from taxes. Again, let's look carefully at the pasuk. Ulechaim, and to you, Mahaydin, I let know. Dichol Chahanaya, all the Kaihanim, V'levaye, and the Leviim, Zamaraya, the musicians, Saraya, the gatekeepers, Nesinaya, the Nesinim, Ufalche Beis Kadina, and the workers of this house of God, Minda V'loi V'halach, taxes la shalit lamirmei aleihim, cannot place on them. See Rashi. V'lachem anu maidiyim. Therefore we let you know. Asher kol hakayhanim v'halavim ha'masharim v'asharim ha'nesinim she'em choit ve'etzim, even the wood choppers v'shaya ve'mayim l'mizbeach v'avoida ve'oivdim ve'es zeh shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yishloit adam aleihim. No one could rule over them. No one could tell them to go anywhere, to enlist anywhere, to be conscripted anywhere, to pay anything. V'hashlich aleihim kol ha'am she'ber anar l'tzar Eretz Yisrael im yoidei ha'Torah. Excuse me. Mas v'kezegos elayu b'nei choyren. They are free from government impositions.
This Daryavish did this on his own?
Daryavish did this on his own. Says the Gemara Bava Basra. Says the Gemara Bava Basra. Daf Zayin and Beis, Daf Chesam and Aleph. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara on Daf Chesam and Aleph. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda Rama Karga Rabbanon. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak placed a certain tax on the rabbis. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Avarta ad Oiraisa v'ad Navi v'ad Ksubi. You violated an Isser D'Oraisa. You violated a pasuk in the Navi. You violated a pasuk in Ksubim. Pasuk in the Torah is Afchoy ve'amim kol kedosha v'yadecha, which means like this: Amar Moshe l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel Olam, afilu b'shah she'ata mechabev amim, even when you show love to the other nations, kol kedoshav biyadecha v'him tuku l'raglecha, you always protect Talmidei Chachamim, and therefore Talmidei Chachamim do not need protection. They do not pay taxes for any government impositions. The Gemara says, what about the Nevi'im? Gam ki yitnu ba'agayim ata akabsem v'yecholu ma'ad mimasa melch v'sarim. Okay, and the Gemara darshans. And what pasuk in Ksubim? A pasuk in Ezra, Perek Zayin, the pasuk we just read, pasuk Chaf Daled, Minda beloi v'halach lo shalet lamirma aleim. Taxes you cannot put on Talmidei Chachamim. So Tosfos asks, what do you mean Talmidei Chachamim? The pasuk in Ezra is not talking about Talmidei Chachamim. It's talking about people serving in the Beis HaMikdash. They're talking about Nesinim. They're chopping wood. They don't know an aleph from a beis. So Tosfos says, just like we exempt people involved in the day-to-day running of the Mikdash from taxes, hachinami ein lahatel mas aloim de Torah. You cannot tax, not midoraisa, divrei neviim, divrei ksuvim. You cannot impose monetary fines on people learning Torah. It's not a halacha; it's an isur doiraisa. Okay, it's important to know. By the way,
who's it chal on? It can't be chal on a Goyish king.
It is chal on a Goyish king. It is.
You talk about his own.
Now there's a law of Dina de Machusa Dina, but the Chassam Sofer says before Dina de Machusa Dina, it's chal on everybody. If you want to look up the Tshuva and the Chassam Sofer, it's Chelek Vav, Siman Chav Tes.
What's this for? How could an Isur D'Oraisa be chal on a guy? It's not one of the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach.
Well, it's chal on the Jew, that the Jew is exempt. Once the Jew is exempt, the guy can't extract it.
Well,
Take it by
don't
force.
have the achrayus of the kehillah to pay the taxes for those who would be exempt, but I can't understand how.
It's like anything. If it's like the Torah says, if you damage a guy, right? If you damage a guy, so now there's certain halachas that you're, b'dinei Yisrael, you're not chayav to pay. So how could the Torah
tell a guy king that he can't impose taxes on a Jew?
It doesn't mean he's going to listen, but you could tell him what to do. God, He created them. Rabbi say, the Gemara says, let's say you're collecting money for a wall, so you're collecting $10 from everybody. Say, Mr. Talmid Chacham, pay the $10. He says, I don't pay. Everyone else has to pay more for me. Why? Gemara says, Rabbanon loibayi netirusa. So now the question is, what if somebody's learning Torah, and he says, I don't want to pay for the wall? But we say, I don't want you to pay for the wall. We want you to serve in the army. Can this Gemara be used as evidence, the halacha, that if someone's learning Torah, he is exempt from army service? Says Chassam Sofer, evidence. It's exactly what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying halacha l'maisa, that if someone is learning Torah, he's exempt from serving in the army. And Chassam Sofer says midda iraisa. To look it up.
Not everybody holds that way.
No, only the Gedolei Yisrael, right? That hold that. And by the way, I want you to know, just once we're on the topic, once we're on the topic, in most matters of Jewish halacha, there's machlokes. In the matter of whether a Talmud who's learning full-time yeshiva can be drafted, there's almost unanimity, more than, as far as I know, more than any other halachic subject. I'm saying, Paiskim and Gedolei HaTorah, if you're namely, top 20 in the last 100 years, Moshe Feinstein, Rav Aaron Koller, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Elyashiv, Rav Ovadia Yosef, Rav Shach, the Tzitz Eliezer, and across the board, I believe even Rav Kook, Chief Rabbi, that if a student is learning in the yeshiva, he's biblically from the. I'm not trying to bring it up because it's a hot topic now. I'm bringing it up because this is the pasuk in the Navi that you learn it out from.
What do we call learning?
Yes, who determines whether they're learning qualified?
Someone who would like and trying to learn.
What?
Someone who's trying to learn.
Someone who's trying to learn. How much?
Okay.
Full time.
How many hours a day?
Full time.
Let's not
Full
go
time.
there. We're not going to make any headway here.
Full time.
Full time.
Full time. Yeah. Someone who's full time.
They had something in Torah about the Levium, 5 years they had to be an apprentice.
Right.
And Rashi said, for 5 years, you don't get it, you're never going to get it. Rashi says that.
Right.
So that means that there is some type of an assessment made.
Yeah. Okay.
Someone learning Torah full time doesn't have achrayus to go out and earn a living too for his family. The Torah tells us that. The Chacham tells us that he has an achrayus to support his family. So how is that?
Actually, the achrayus rests on me and you to make sure he has money so that he could support his family. The achrayus is not on him. Achrayus is on me.
He has to go learn a trade to be able to support his family.
So now, okay, that's a question. What is one's obligation towards one's family? What is one's obligation towards one community? What's one's obligations towards oneself? Certainly, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes that in today's day and age, you can make a living from being a Rebbe or a rabbi, or sort of some semblance of one, or something of that sort.
Maybe.
But Rav Moshe says it's an umnus nekiya v'kala. Rav Moshe says that's also a living. But look, this is the fundamental principle. Fundamental principle is that a person can't say, shivyon banatal, right? That expression is really halachically antithetical to halacha. We mean, no, not shivyon banatal. Share the burden. The Gemara is saying that when it comes to protection, they're exempt. But the Gemara says further. The Gemara says, Rabbanon loiboina tirusa, rabbis don't need protection. That means they're the ones offering us protection. You have to believe that. Rabbeinu Yoina cites this Gemara, and he says like this: anyone who says, Mayahani le Rabbanon, oh, what are the rabbis doing? They're just sitting there and learning. You know what Rabbeinu Yoina says? In Api Kairos. Rabbeinu Yoina, I'm not saying political. Whatever your own tradition is, I'm not discussing that. Somebody who says, Mayahani le Rabbanon, they're just sitting in their 4 cubits, and what are they accomplishing? The guy with the rifle, he's doing something for the world. The guy who's learning, he's not doing anything. Rabbeinu Yonah says, you're denying a fundamental principle of the Torah. You pick up a bottle of wine, it's like a member of another faith picking up the bottle of wine. You're not bikoros. If you say, what do people who learn Torah do for us? Rabbeinu Yonah says, you're not bikoros. La halacha. That means if you buy kedem grape juice that's not mavushal, nobody else could drink it if you pick it up.
Why didn't that outline though as one of the exemptions when they had it in Torah? These are the things that a person is exempt from going to the army. One of the ones didn't say those who were sitting and learning.
Right.
What? Why didn't it say?
Those who were sitting to learn.
Exemptions.
You have a house you didn't
Just got
had to
married.
marry, right? You didn't say, oh, by the way, if you're learning, Moshe Rabbeinu must have had the biggest yeshiva, there at that point in time.
You say you don't go out.
That's talking about when the enemy is in your face and it's Mechemes Mitzvah, and the person is needed. So the person is needed. So then, if he's in Sana Rishana, he's exempt. If he's just stam sitting there, in other words, if there comes a time where people are needed, that might be a different story. But right now, even they don't need them, right? They're not needed. They have enough soldiers. It's just a matter of, well, it's not fair. It's not right. Who said? Why should we do it? So that then it's an exemption. But I'll read to you the words of Sam Sofer. He says, he's talking about. He's not even talking about the Israeli. He's talking about the Austrian Hungarian army. He says, the obligation to serve in the army rests on the head of anyone who could go out. V'she'ein lo ishu banim, who's not married, doesn't have children. K'fi nimos v'chayk malchusai. Ach loy abachurim loimdei Torah. Not students learning Torah. Shafilu loy patrum. Even if the government doesn't exempt them, beferish midin Torah paturim. They're exempt. Amrina b'perikama devav basra. Hakol l'karya pasya afilu rabbanon. And says of Sam Sofer, Baruch Hashem, in our government, they agree with this rule of the Torah, that the Austrian Hungarian army will not draft yeshiva students. The American army didn't draft yeshiva students. But my grandfather, during World War II, my grandfather was, he was in yeshiva, so he wasn't drafted.
I could tell you from personal experience that during the time of the Vietnam
in wartime, but not always. World War II, not.
We lost 250,000 people in the war.
Okay.
It's a war, Mama, sure war.
Okay, you're right. I'm just saying, World War II.
Were able to get a deferment called a 4D, the divinity student, right? And I would venture to say, from personal experience, the very large majority of them didn't really learn, but they just sat there. Because they wanted the exemption. They didn't want to go to
I'm
the
just
army.
pointing out this is something that even secular government understands, right? Okay.
The Israeli government understands too. They're willing to give a certain amount of exemptions for those people who are really willing to sit and learn, not just to go to a yeshiva and look at the 4 walls or look at the ceiling.
I humbly suggest on behalf of probably the very, very high percent of Gedolei Yisrael that it should not be in the hands of the secular Israeli government to decide who's learning and who's not learning. Leave that to the Rosh Yeshiva to decide, as opposed to people who would like nothing better than to uproot Judaism. Okay.
And the Rosh Yeshiva are interested in in other words, the Rosh Yeshiva will not exempt students who are sitting there but not learning, only to protect them. I mean,
if a student is draying around and he's wasting his time,
right?
So then he has to ask a personal question. If he would ask a Rosh Yeshiva, should I go to the army? If he's able to serve in a unit that, let's say, would be able to meet his standards of Jewish observance. As far as I know, there are many Charedim who are serving in the army today. No, not the vast majority, but the matter is like this. If you have a kid, he's not learning anything, and he could go serve in a unit that the Gedolim feel will not lower his standards of Jewish observance. Kol hakavod, good, wonderful. Wonderful. What do you have a kid? He's trying to learn. So you're going to make him a criminal because he has to go serve in the army? It's against the halacha. It's against the halacha. But every person, even very good students, they can't learn every second. They're also human beings. A kid who's making a sincere attempt to learn full time, A kid who's wasting away his time, so he should have the seichel to ask his Rosh Yeshiva, what should I do? What should I do with my life? Are you going to have every yeshiva full of 100% kids devoted to? Of course not. You don't have that. Look, in the Israeli public school system, 15% of the students have missed more than 3 days of class because of they were injured terribly because of violence in the public school system. You know that 50% of teachers in the Israeli public school system, their lives were threatened by students. You know that when they had a trance concert in Tel Aviv, where they were playing music that, when it's so loud, it puts you into hypnotic trance, especially if you took drugs before. And they did not advertise the concert. You know how many Israeli youth attended the concert? 50,000.
What are you saying?
These 50,000 students, did they serve in the army or they're drafting the army? They're dodging. I think that a very large percentage of them are not serving in the army. So before you look to some kid who, instead of sitting in the Gemara, he's goofing off a little bit, why don't you take care of the violence in the public school systems, straighten out the Israeli youth who are on the verge of societal breakdown. We're worried about kids who are reading a book instead of the Gemara open in front of them. This kid would never pick up a gun in his life, right? You ask, go into a regular yeshiva in Israel. Excuse me, kid, how many of your friends ever brought a revolver into school? He'd laugh at you. How many of your friends ever brought a knife into school? He'd laugh at you. You go into the public school system, what percent of your friends? 90% are carrying weapons. These kids are serving in the army. First take care of Israeli society before you're worried about, the Haredim students who are not learning Tosfos the way you want them to learn Tosfos. Okay.
We'll have this discussion privately.
Too late.
We have to
Okay.
We have to edit all of this out.
Okay.
It's going to create a firestorm on the web.
Look, so let's see. But you should know. If somebody asks you, what's the source that's Dina de Gemara, that Talmid Chacham are patur from taxes. That's from Ezra, Perek Zayin, Pasuk, Chaf, Daled.
But can I just think, is the Talmid Chacham himself really patur from the taxes, or it's that the community has to pay the Talmid Chacham share because he's not the one responsible to pay the taxes?
You mean now that he's patur, does the onus fall
on the Kehillah? That it's not that. So I still have difficulty with how we can tell a Goyish king that you can't tax this Talmid Chacham. But that the onus, we accept it as a Kehillah ourselves, that they're not.
Should the Talmid Chacham offer to pay it?
No.
On his own?
No, the Achrayus is on the Kehillah.
Yes.
Those who the Torah says are exempt.
Right.
Midoraisa.
Right.
That Achrayus becomes on the Kupa of the Kehillah. I think much more logical to say than to say that we can tell a Goyish king, you can't impose taxes. This is a class of exemption.
Well, here Daryavish is exempting it himself. You want to know, could we then enforce any Goyish king? It's a theoretical question because we would never have the power to go to a king and say.
Think about the United States.
Yeah.
You can never tell the United States, the IRS, that if somebody is...
No, what do you mean? There's parsonage.
But you're not exempt from taxes.
Yes, you are. No, you're exempt. They're exemptions.
You pay Social Security tax.
Social Security, yes.
And you pay other taxes.
But some, the income...
Parsonage is a portion of your tax. It's not the full amount.
Okay.
And if somebody plays games and puts more on what your housing allowance is, clothing allowance, food allowance...
Correct.
But if you make $250,000 as a Rav, you don't get parsonage for $250,000.
Yeah, right. Unless you have a big mortgage, yeah.
All right. So you're not exempt from taxes entirely.
Okay.
Can you imagine saying that the United States government? I could see that we could say that if a Rav has to pay some tax, they can't.
No. So I'll tell you the truth. The Rabbanim are not exempt from all taxes. The Gemara says, let's say your taxes. You need tax for water supply. So the rabbi's not giving you water, so he has to pay his share also. It's only in taxes for protection, army service, walls, protection, shomrim. In other words, specifically protection. But let's say you're paying a tax.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, any tax that's just a service, then Talmid Chacham are chayiv also. Right. It's not an exempt. Hey, you're learning, so you don't have to help out. No. That's the thing. That's the thing. It's not that we're saying they don't have to share the burden. We say they are sharing in the burden. Their service is a form of protection. But whatever's not involved in protection, then they have to pay their fair share. Right. Okay, one more. Va'ant Ezra, and you Ezra, kechachmas alakach vidach, according to the wisdom of your God in your hand, many, which is even more than shaftin v'dayanin, the judges and various types of judges, the lehevoin dainin l'chalama, that judge the whole nation, di ba'avar nara, on the other side of the river, l'chol yoydei dasei alakach, all those who know the law of God, v'di lo yada, and whoever doesn't know tahaydan, you should let them know. So there are various ways to read this pasuk. Let's see Rashi. Rashi learns, v'lachem anu ma'idiyim, we let you know. Excuse me. V'anta Ezra kechachmas alakach di b'dach, v'yata Ezra kefi chachmas alakach asher b'dach, you Ezra, according to the wisdom of God that is in your hands, yoyser min hashoftim v'hadayanim, more than the other judges, shehim danin kol ha'am, that judge a nation, she'be'er hanar letzad Eretz Yisrael, im yoydei ha'Torah, and those who don't know, you Ezra, I am entrusting you to teach and instruct and give information to those Jews who are not well versed in the law of God. Okay, we'll pick it up over here, Mitzvah Hashem, next week.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.